People who have pretended to fall asleep. What is something interesting you've overheard? I remember way back I couldn't sleep on Christmas Eve. You know, being a little kid and all. So during this sleepless night where I guess my parents thought I was asleep, I heard my dad say, "Where do you think we should hide the new puppy?" That was pretty much at the top of my list. So naturally I was excited that I was getting a puppy. They talked for a good 20 minutes about the puppy, saying things like how should we keep it from barking before he finds him? Before I dozed off. Next morning, I discovered that my parents knew I was awake and just decided to duck with me. There was no goddamn puppy. I got a Game Boy though, so it wasn't too bad. Was spending the night at a friend's house. I'm a guy, she's a girl. Brought my friend over because we were out partying. We all slept in the same room. I was laying on the floor near my friend when I heard my friend Andrea call my name. Wanting to sleep, I ignored her not moving, to which she responded, "Okay. Andy, I think he's asleep. Come here." About 5 minutes later I hear the bed squeaking and her soft moans. One of them sneezed about 15 minutes into it, in which I responded, "Bless you." They immediately stopped. 10/10 would do again. Edit. Holy shit, I got gilded. Thanks, my gold was expiring in a few days. Now I can spend more time picking out these smokes instead of worrying about being gilded. When I was a kid, my mom would make my brother and me take naps for like 45 minutes. I pretended like I was sleeping, and I heard my mom talking on the phone to my grandma. During the conversation I assume my grandma asked what my brother and I were up to, because she said Imhali's brother is sleeping, and Imhali is pretending to be asleep. I was like, duck. She said she knew I was faking because my mouth was closed, and whenever I'm actually asleep my mouth is slightly open. Ever since that day, whenever I'm pretending to be asleep for whatever reason, I keep my mouth slightly open. Thanks for the tip, mom. Weekend retreat at church camp. My buddy and another friend's girl and I ended up in a room with 2 bunk beds. We were chilling when I realized that I was the third wheel. So I powered down. First there were tests to see if I was awake. Then she climbed to his top bunk. Then kissing. Then her moaning. Then her telling him he should wash his hand. I got bored and did some fake sleep talking. They laughed and continued, but they called it a night without rounding home. She left, and I figured it was best to not give high fives till the next day. I don't know why I waited until we were at his house. Maybe she rode back with us. Still, it was my first time playing Super Nintendo, and as he handed me the controller that would introduce me to Yoshi, I asked him, "You did wash your hands, right?" He was so thrilled to get to talk to someone about it. When I was 8, on Christmas Eve I overheard Santa eating the cookies and drinking the milk. Later he opened the fridge and ate a large chunk of a cake and ran around the living room smearing the cake everywhere. Santa was our dog. Night after drinking with friends, I wasn't really pretending, more trying to keep my head from spinning. I overhear my buddy say to my other friend, say, "I wonder how easy it is to smother someone to death." I'd have said something about keeping one eye open when you sleep for that exact reason, but you were having the spins. That's a valid reason to not fire off a response. Was in this messed up relationship with my ex-husband when I was pregnant with my second kid. We had a roommate, female, but we would all have sex with each other because we were young and free-spirited or something. Anyway, I pretended to be asleep one night because I didn't feel like having sex that night and didn't want to turn anybody down or make up an excuse. My ex-husband and the roommate got to talking in the next room. The bedroom door was open so I could hear them pretty clearly, and she asked him why he married me anyway. His response, "I just didn't know what else to do at that point." Seemed like the next logical step and I took it. I honestly wish I hadn't done it, and I wish I was single right now living life. But now I have this ducking family and I'm not sure how I'm gonna get out. Hit me real hard. A French girl I met in a hostel came into where I was sleeping and just sat there. I had just cut it off with her so I didn't want to deal with her sheet, so I pretended to be asleep for a few minutes. She just mumbled random sheet. She was pretty drunk. Finally, what got me up was when, in the cutest French accent, she told me she was going to set me on fire in my sleep. I should have mentioned that. Yes, I did sleep with her again after that. Sometimes you gotta do messed up shit to stay not on fire. I was drunk at a party and couldn't fathom the world, so I lay down. Closed my eyes in a dark room. I heard two of my friends come in. One came over to me and poked me in the ribs, then said it's fine, he's asleep. Then proceed to talk about how both of them were cheating on their boyfriends and who at the party they wanted to duck. A screaming match involving the line, "I want you to say one nice thing about my kids." 1. Followed by silence and door slamming. I was less than 3 feet away as one of my best friends took a 19-year's virginity. We traveled from the Bay to later attend a rave with some girls we met at EDC a few months prior. After all the partying took place, one buddy took the older sister to his car, and my other buddy started making moves on the younger sister. I was sleeping on the floor and was petrified because I felt like if I moved, it would kill his game. So I sat through the most awkward sexual experience of my life to help him get laid. It was short and sporadic, but they both seemed to enjoy it, I think. So I think I made the right decision pretending to be asleep on the floor as they bunny humped on the bed literally 2 feet from me. I was pretending to be asleep in a hostel dorm room because I didn't want to deal with others. Girl and a guy started ducking in the bed across from me. She was on top and Kana with yay horsey. Yay. Wee. My mum told a friend via telephone. I thought my husband was cheating. So now I do it too. I still don't know what to do. Edit. My father has not cheated and it's proven. My mum is just stupid. They're getting divorced now. I heard my roommate on a cruise ship getting viciously and sloppily finger-banged for over an hour while the guy kept saying to her too. Guess how many fingers are in you now? Pretended to be asleep at a sleepover. Heard my supposed friends planning to throw my clothes in the tree. Duck middle school. That's nothing. We filled my friend's sleeping bag with uncooked hot dogs. Of course he woke up and resisted. But we were stronger. Must have been about 16. 17-ish. Was staying at a friend's house who was with his girlfriend. He was the first in our circle to have sex and he ducking loved to brag about it. How much of a natural he was. How surprised his girlfriend was that she was his first. All that cliché bollocks. We all just laughed. Let him have his fun. And got on with it. Anyway. Back to being at his place with her. I go and crash early on the floor of their room, in a kick-ass little blanket pile with her dog. It was great. I was just getting bored of him rampantly flirting at her like a brain-damaged peacock. So, about a half hour later, they come in. And of course they start ducking. I honestly think they forgot I was there or something. I hear very loud kissing. A few Batman grunts. A bit of whimpering. They had started and finished in less than a minute. So I'm lying, curled up in the corner of their room under blankets and a dog, listening to my friend cry in shame while his girlfriend was finishing herself off. That was a great night. When I was 6/7 I remember staying up late without the babysitter realizing whilst my parents were out. I remember when they came back home I was so worried about getting into trouble for still being awake that I pretended to be asleep. Mum came in the room asking whether or not I was awake. I stayed quiet, and then she just sat down on my bed. She was quiet for what felt like forever but was probably only a couple of minutes before she bent over, stroked my hair, and kissed the top of my head whilst telling me how much she loved me and how much I meant to her, and then she tucked the covers around me tighter and left. To this day it's my favorite memory of her and one I've never shared with anyone. Edit. Thank you so much for the gold. Never expected to receive any. It just proves what I've always known. I have an amazing mum. Also to everyone who told me to tell her. I will. Her birthday is coming up in a month so I'm going to figure out how to word it in a birthday card. I was dozing off in my bed with my girlfriend at the time when I heard her confess her love for me. She was pretty hammered, but she went into intricate detail about how she feels respected, enjoys the sex, and sees a serious future with me. The next morning I got yelled at for not cuddling and that it was a major issue. I don't think she even knew of her confession. Spelling. Lying in bed when I was a little girl and my stepdad, who must have been in there for half an hour, jumped out of the airing cupboard in the dark, roaring, and terrified me. Still hate people jumping out on me suddenly revealing themselves. When I was about 13 or 14, not that long ago, I overheard my parents talk about my dog, Chowder. I was in the living room half passed out from exhaustion while they were in the dining area. Chowder was in the vet for a couple of days because of something called distemper. I just thought that after a few days, he'd get better and go back home and be the normal dog he would be. I was wrong. I lay motionless on the sofa because I was lazy to get up. I accidentally heard mom crying. I heard words like, "What will we tell her? And she can't know this before her exams. She might not do well." By this time, I got really curious, so I tried my best to stay awake while staying in the uncomfortable position that I was in. A few other medical terms passed and I hear the word euthanize. I knew what that meant and it took me a few seconds to put the pieces together. I cried the whole night and they found out in the morning. So there, not really interesting. Just heartbreaking. I've heard my dad listening to porn through the speakers when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8. I couldn't even comprehend what I heard and fell asleep shortly thereafter. You gotta be younger than me. Because when I caught my dad looking at porn, the pic was probably loaded 75% on the screen. And my dad was panting like a dog. Not me. But once during a sleepover in middle school, this girl pretended to sleep to try and catch us saying bad things about her. We never did. We really liked her. But we did say I wish Catherine was still awake, at which point she snapped awake and was all, "Ha. You don't really love me." Well, one time I heard my brother getting jerked off by his at the time boyfriend. So glad we remodeled our house the following year and I got my own room finally. My mom to her friend. When I was like 8. I don't actually even like her. She's so annoying. I want to get rid of her. Naturally I burst into tears. She said she was sorry. She knew I was awake. And it was just a joke. She's got a cruel sense of humor. Not me. But was told to me by someone at a party. Apparently someone else who wasn't his father went upstairs with his mother while he was sleeping in the living room. Turns out it was his uncle. Not his father's brother. His mother's brother. On my way back from a race in Colorado and my buddy got pulled over for speeding in Iowa. I was on the bench seat sprawled out trying to sleep. When we pulled over I asked what's going on. "We're getting pulled over." I promptly said, "You guys deal with that shit, I'm going to sleep." Pretended to be asleep and heard the cop go, "What the duck's up with your buddy? Is he okay?" And give my friends a ton of shit for having me asleep in the back. GG, cop didn't try and wake me though. Now that I think of it, that's not even the first time. I was a freshman in college and a couple friends rented a house in RI and us all being underage idiots proceeded to have massive party. Cops raided it. I ran upstairs and jumped in a bed and foe. Cops barge in looking for shit. Shining the flashlight in my face. I still pretend to be asleep. They call over and are like, "Hey so and so, this kid's ducked up." They laugh. Find a little weed on the other bed in the room. Proceed to let me sleep through everything. My best friend and I were at another friend's house. Other friend had a boyfriend at the time. But they were going through some shit and split up, but we were always like, "Oh, they'll get back together." We had a pretty cool weekend of drinking, games, watching films and eating food. We had the house to ourselves and we would fall asleep wherever. I was put up in a room with a spare bed and next to the boyfriend because I'm a guy and they wanted the guys together. I had been sleeping pretty rough one night. And I awoke to hear soft moaning from the bed next to me. He's just jerking off, I thought. So I just turned over and tried to sleep. Then it started again. Moaning. But it wasn't him. It was a female. My distorted hearing due to drifting out of sleep heard it get louder and more raunchy. I was so freaked out. I was fully awake and I just had to pretend to sleep and endure this nightmare. After they finished, he waddled off to the toilet after stepping on my bed naked and the girl was left there. I looked at her to realize it wasn't his ex. It was my best friend. She thought I was asleep. I thought he was ducking his ex. But I still gave her a high five for it. Back in grade school I was over at a friend's place with a couple other friends for a sleepover. We were watching Kenny vs Penny. The episode where they see who can go around naked the longest or something. His mom comes in and thinks he watching gay porn. Naturally we pretend to be asleep while him mom reams him out and thinks he's watching gay porn in front of us. Sorry Scott. Good times though. Fell asleep on a table outside at a party. Woke up but remained with head on table. Cute girl I was talking to earlier begins discussing me with my friend. Then says she considered getting off with me earlier but I kept passing out. I'm like duck yeah let's get it on. Drunk me springs up and says well I'm sober now then passes out again. Informed by said friend of mine see the following day. Freshman year in college. I wake up at 3 AM to my roommate and her friend drunk whispering about me in the kitchen area. She gets up too early. I hate how she doesn't go out on Fridays. So annoying. Etc. If you had a problem with me as a roommate, tell it to me straight. Preferably do this early in the semester, not the week before term ends, so that I can adjust my habits and be a better roommate. I had been sleeping on the couch in my CCA room in school and I heard my name just as I woke up so I stayed put to eavesdrop. A couple of mates were talking about me in a positive light and saying nice things about me without knowing I was awake. It was really nice to hear it especially since I was a relatively low point at that time. Every time I think about this I feel good. Even though it's been a half dozen years or so. And it always reminds me to uphold those good characteristics. I wasn't pretending. I had been asleep for about 30 minutes while my boyfriend and his buddy were smoking some weed up. I'm not really sure what woke me up but I kind of became conscious for a few moments but didn't really move or anything so I was just trying to go back to sleep. Anyway. My boyfriend, who had been rubbing my back as I slept, turned to his buddy and said hey man. You see this girl right here? I'm gonna marry her one day. She's gonna be my wife. And his buddy just says yeah dude. I know. And I'll be standing right there with you when it happens. It was so sweet and it was so hard to not just tear up or smile or anything. But when things are tough I sure do think of that night.